Did you know New York City is sitting on $250 billion? Now, what if, instead of just letting that money churn away in the stock market, the city used it to, say, fix its housing crisis and build its very own public bank? Well, a pretty radical new proposal suggests doing exactly that. And it all starts by rethinking the city's massive pension system from the ground up.
Okay, so how on earth would a plan like this actually work? Well, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to get a sense of just how huge these pension funds are. Then, we'll look at the two very different stories about how they're performing. After that, we'll dive into this pay-as-you-go idea, see what you could do with $250 billion in cash, and finally, weigh the big choice facing New York City.
All right, first things first, we need to wrap our heads around the scale of what we're talking about here. It's what one critic calls the fiscal elephant in the room.
So this whole idea really comes from the Public Banking Institute, and their argument is pretty simple. The city has these 5 separate pension funds, and they're so enormous, so complex, that we've kind of stopped seeing them for what they are. A massive, massive pool of public money that could maybe be used in a totally different way.
And here's the size of that elephant. We're talking about roughly $250 billion. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. $250 billion. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire gross domestic product of a country like Portugal, all tied up in this one system.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. When you start digging into how this mountain of cash is actually being managed, you find two completely conflicting narratives.
On one hand, you've got the official story from the city comptroller. It paints a pretty rosy picture, right? The funds are healthy, they're seeing strong returns, and they're on track to be fully funded. But then, you have the critics, and they see a system that's just hemorrhaging money. They point to out-of-control management fees and a structure that, according to a report from a former comptroller, basically wiped out an entire decade of investment gains.
So, when you look at it from that critical point of view, the one that says the system itself is the problem, it leads you to ask a really fundamental and, yeah, pretty provocative question.
I mean, think about it. If the whole fund structure is inefficient and Wall Street management fees are just eating up all the returns, why even have these investment funds in the first place? What if you could guarantee people's pensions without them? And the proposed alternative is something called a pay-as-you-go system, or pay-go. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's actually way simpler. Instead of putting money into this giant investment pot for the future, the city would just use its regular income, tax revenue, to pay retirees their pensions directly as they come due. The most important part here is that the pensions don't go away. The city would legally guarantee them, making them a direct city obligation, just like paying for sanitation or schools.
Okay, so the proposal lays out a clear 4-step plan to get there. Step 1, and this is absolutely crucial, you legally guarantee every single penny of a pensioner's pay right in the city charter. That's non-negotiable. Step 2, you stop feeding the beast. No more new money gets rolled into these investment funds. Step 3, you carefully, gradually sell off the entire $250 billion portfolio over about 5 years. And that leads to the final and most game-changing step, figuring out what to do with all that unlocked cash.
And that brings us to what is easily the most exciting part of this whole idea. What would New York City actually do with $250 billion? Well, the proposal has a very clear vision for that.
First up, a huge investment. $30 billion sent straight to the New York City Housing Authority. Now, this isn't just a Band-Aid. The proposal argues this is enough cash to finally close the massive funding gap for critical repairs that has been plaguing public housing residents for decades.
Next, another $50 billion would go towards creating something brand new, a New York City public bank. You could think of it like a financial utility for the city, built with the city's own money to serve the city's own needs, not the needs of private shareholders. And we're going to dig into that in just a second.
And with a big chunk of the money that's left over, the city would pay down its existing debt. Now, this has an incredible ripple effect. It would immediately boost the city's credit rating. And what that means is, anytime the city needs to borrow money in the future for big projects, it gets a much better interest rate, which ends up saving taxpayers billions and billions of dollars in the long run.
Okay, so let's focus on that public bank idea, because it's a huge piece of this puzzle. It might sound totally radical, but it's not a new concept at all. In fact, to understand how it might work, you can look at a model that's been running successfully for over 100 years.
And this quote from State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani really captures the vision, right? It's about a financial system where public money is actually used for the public good. investing in things like affordable housing or local businesses, instead of just making profits for Wall Street. So at its core, a public bank works kind of like a public utility, like the water department. It's owned by the government on behalf of all the citizens. Its main job isn't to maximize profit, it's to provide stable, affordable credit and then reinvest any earnings it makes right back into the local community.
And the prime example of this, the one everybody points to, is the Bank of North Dakota. It was founded way back in 1919, and it's the only state-owned bank in the entire country. By law, it holds all of the state's money. But here's the cool part. It doesn't try to compete with local banks. It actually partners with them. It helps them give out loans for small businesses, farms, and students. And the best part? Its profits go right back into the state budget. This model has made their economy incredibly stable. It's helped them weather big national storms like the 2008 financial crisis way better than most other states.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, a public bank sounds nice, but it's probably not very profitable. Well, check out this chart. According to one analysis, the Bank of North Dakota's average return on equity over the last 2 decades hasn't just been good, it's been significantly better than JP Morgan Chase, the biggest private bank in the country.
So at the end of the day, this whole thing boils down to a really fundamental choice about the city's financial strategy and what its priorities should be for the future.
On one side, you've got the status quo. Keep this massive investment fund going depending on the whims of the market and a bunch of outside managers. On the other side, you've got this proposal. Switch to a pay-as-you-go system that unlocks all that capital so you can invest it directly into city priorities like a public bank, housing, and infrastructure. So which is it? Is this a bold, visionary path to financial freedom for New York City? Or is it a reckless gamble with the retirement security of hundreds of thousands of public servants? It's a $250 billion question, and whatever answer the city chooses will shape its future for generations to come.